Welcome to everybody. Greetings from Berlin. Welcome to this conference, Making Cities Edible. It's the Edible City Network Conference, and we are really happy to see all these participants. And we start with an opening session with some first views on our program today and tomorrow. We start with some keynotes from really famous and important drivers of edible cities. And then we go into insights from the ground, voices from the ground in the first large session on edible city solutions. Then we have at 1 a short lunch break. And then we continue with policy and strategies questions, how to implement, anchor edible city solutions into policy and strategies. Tomorrow, in the second day, we will really meet people and initiatives, and we will network. So there are a lot of possibilities to chat, to connect with other conference participants, with experts. We really try to organize this conference in a way that it will not enhance online fatigue and Zoom fatigue. And then at 11, we have the EdicidNet award ceremony. So there you can see some really showcases, best practices. And after a short lunch break, then we have the session on building alliances for edible city solutions. There we discuss how we can connect us better and bridging gaps and moving forward and continue to grow this movement. In this opening session, you will have Mary Clear and Jörg Niewöhner as keynote speakers. And my name is Ina Säumel. I'm a biologist and geographer by training, and I'm leading the EdicidNet project. And I have to tell you some few words of our project. You can see that there are a lot of people involved in the project. You can see this in this logo. Portfolio, let's say. And we are working on challenges that all of you know. Next slide, please. Yes, these are the challenges of urban life. Urban environmental conditions that challenge, of course, also human health and well-being, and also threaten the natural resources. And we have in every part of the world an ongoing urbanization, which decreases the green space per capita and increase the need to counteract environmental injustice, criminality, segregation, exclusion of vulnerable groups. And we have rising costs to maintenance these infrastructures and to optimize these infrastructures for mitigation of climate change. Next slide. And so for us in the EdicidNet project, we have a mission and a co-creation strategy that I want to shortly share with you. You can later on see also some more insights in these sessions. Edible city solutions for us is a special type of nature-based solutions, which overcome the mismatch between the traditional nature-based solutions and the citizens by deepening the social dimension of nature-based solutions. Here we learned a lot from the worldwide movement on edible cities. So we aim and explore and refine and mainstream edible city solutions that are per se socially inclusive, invite citizens to co-create the sustainable development of their society, to proactively change the urban environment to their own benefit, and to induce also a paradigm shift of lifestyle. We do this as a community of knowledge, practice, and cosmology, which goes together and work together. So here you can see what are edible city solutions. It's really a wide range of different forms of sustainable urban farming, food production, distribution, consumption. We focus or we want to highlight that we need ecological design principles, closed loop systems for sustainable water and nutrient and waste management to really reduce the footprint and the footprint. And so our urban food production uses innovative principles of ecological design, closed material and energy flows. Next. On the co-creation aspect of EdiSITNet, which is really the key to change something. We have in our network currently 13 open and participatory city teams across the world with really different actors, with all relevant actors in each city. So there are administrators, administration staff from the cities, planners, members of local NGOs, but also small and medium enterprises, business people. And they work together in a collective learning process, which leads us to hopefully a comprehensive and co-developed knowledge base, which some insights we want to share as well in this meeting. So we have practical and theoretical context. Next slide. And what we do is we co-create and test edible city solutions in living labs, and we co-develop sustainable master plans for the edible cities of the future. So I'm really happy now to hand over the word to our two first keynote speakers. First to Mary. Mary is, well, an emblematic key person in the edible city movement worldwide. Mary is activist and and in a hurry to do her bit for a better world. She believes in saying, be the change you want to be, you want to see. And as be the change you want to be and to see, of course. And Mary is chairperson of incredible Edible Todmorden and co-founder of the idea that has rooted across the world. So one of our pioneers here. And we are really happy to give you the floor and to have insights and then to discuss this with you. Mary, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I wish I was a European and I'm sorry about that. So I'll just share the screen. Yes, here we go. So I'm just going to tell you a short, quick story about our actions. And it really is for us about the power of small actions. So in 2008, which seems a long time ago, the planet was in trouble. There was a volcano in Iceland and a worldwide economic crash. And we weren't so much worried about ourselves. We were worried about our children and our children's future and what would be left on this planet of ours. And we thought, how can we respond to this worldwide economic crisis and to the state of nature? We thought we'll use the tools of our own community. We'll use their hearts, their hands, and the skills that ordinary people bring with them, because we needed to wake up and shake up what we were doing. So our very first steps to connect with people, to connect with the soil, to connect with the seasons, to improve public spaces and create a kindness culture, a culture where we could care for each other in floods, economic disasters, in shortage of food. If we were kinder to each other, we would be a stronger community. So we started to garden, make gardens in public places where anybody could help themselves. And we were never short of volunteers. People say, oh, children aren't interested. Actually, children, given a little fork, love to be interested. And we're in a very, very difficult town. We've got a microclimate of rain, and snow. So it's difficult. It's not the Garden of Eden. It's not Southern England. It's a harsh environment here. So we have very little space. So this is the police station, which we've changed into a garden. This is right by the main road outside a very busy pub. So we've got tiny pockets that we've made our little gardens. This is the health centre, which we've got the whole footprint of this building. So we've got apples, pears, plums, berries, a medical herb garden, and it's open all the time to the public. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Build a health centre, but don't build an edible garden. That's crazy. So we've changed that. This is the government's building. The government said we were never allowed to speak about this garden, but they didn't say we weren't allowed to show slides. We've created along the towpath a linear pollinators garden, which runs for a very long way, and it's fabulous. Come and see it. With space right in the middle of town where we're growing all sorts of herbs and vegetables. And you can see we've got a variety of volunteers, which is really lovely. But our greatest resource is our people, and they really are our joy and hope. After every gardening session, we eat together, a large number of people, complete strangers often, sitting and eating. And we found that is the secret, that is the glue for community, is food. This is in the middle of winter. The ground's frozen solid, but still people come to sit and eat really simple food together. And our message is really, anybody can do it. It's one essential ingredient, one essential seed, which is kindness. And we really believe that kindness to each other and to the planet is absolutely win-win. You know, the police don't mind that we didn't ask. The police love it that they've got little children visiting outside the police station. And we've all sorts of people who want to help. Sometimes we have so many people, we haven't got the ability to share out the gardens with them. And just people always want to know, where does the money come from? Well, this is where our money comes from. Kindness is our currency, but we do need to buy things, and we get it from vegetable tourism. So people started to visit from all over the world to look at our gardens. So we suggested we'll create a map, tour guides, and give you a tour. And if you want to pay some money to us, you can. If you have no money or you don't want to, you still get the tour. It's win-win. And then we started to talk with other groups, other communities across the world, and things started to grow. But I want to say, essentially, we're not interested in that because nobody's paid. There are no jobs. There's nowhere to go with this except to pursue our own dream that the world can be better. So these are just some of the other projects across the world. It's a nice slide, so I show it to you. We're much more interested in the small. We believe the beauty of the small and the power is in small actions. So this is our local mosque. It's most probably the only mosque in the whole wide world that says kindness outside the door. So we're very good at reaching out, using food to work with other communities. During Corona virus lockdown, we made libraries. We've made 25 exquisite little libraries that are filled with books, and we just stuck them all around town. We built new gardens in the pandemic, really beautiful new gardens. We cleared the rubbish from the towns, we made seats, we painted bridges. So it's not fancy, it's not clever, it's simply kindness to the planet. The people really matter. Using food as the glue for a stronger, more resilient community. It's a fact, it's magic. Growing food is like magic. So we're all can be magicians. Growing with people is even better. To make connections with people is far more important actually than making connections with plants, because it will spread and get deep roots. And one of the things that we believe firmly in is asking forgiveness rather than permission. Because if over the years we started to negotiate every tiny piece of land with paperwork and rules, we would have never got anywhere. So we really do believe we're willing to say sorry and move on, but actually actions speak louder, and it's all been okay. So there's no office, there's no paid staff, there's no computer that belongs to the organization. It's good coffee, cakes, and comrades. And I think anyone can do it. There's nothing special about us, absolutely nothing. It's kindness, and we've all got a kindness muscle. We've just got to use it more and it will grow. That's it. That was fast. Am I on time?
Perfect, Mary. And we have also more time to discuss. Thank you for this inspiring talk. And you have been made as the rock star of the urban farming movement. So really,
I hope my grandchildren hear that.
And I see the person Helena from Oslo, from Nabolagshaga, she's saying this, and she is the local rock star on urban farming as well.
Oh,
so thank you for this talk. We will have more time to discuss. I would invite Jörg to bring his vision on the topic, on the urban food and the Anthropocene into the discussion. Jörg is the director of the IRITHESys at Humboldt University. He's environmental scientist, and he studied actually in UK. So he also offered to bring you home, or bring UK home to Europe. And he's has a chair on social anthropology and life science at the Institute of European Ethnology of the Humboldt University. And I'm sure that we will get some different insights from Jörg. And then I'm really happy to discuss this with all of you. And for the others, please use the Q&A box to post your questions, and we will answer them all and discuss later. Jörg, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes. A bit more if you want.
No, I don't want to. Thank you. Thanks, Ina. And well, thank you, Mary. What an amazing presentation. I think the shortest summary of my contribution would be just to say yes. But I guess I have to do a little more than that. So first of all, I hope that you weather the storm that's coming upon you up in Todmorden. So, but I'm sure you've seen a few of those come and go. So, good luck with that. Secondly, what I have to say is, in some way, something completely different, as I say, but in many ways, it's the same. What I would like to do, on the basis of the kind of the transdisciplinary work that we've been doing at IRITHESys, I'd like to contextualize a little, and I'm afraid it's a little more abstract and longer words, but still not fancy, so not to worry. What I'd like to do is provide a bit of context, because I think what you presented and what you made look so easy, Mary, is actually, or can be, superbly difficult if one is not like you and just sort of goes for it with this amazing spirit and enthusiasm. So what I'd like to sort of ponder is why these projects sometimes are so difficult, and what we can maybe learn from them, looking across a few that we've been running at IRITHESys. So what I've brought, rather than inspiring pictures, is I've dreamt up this little word, Sociotropic Territories. So that's a bit of a long fancy word, but I'll try and explain what I mean. It's really a term that I use to capture how amazing this is that Mary has just been presenting, and all the others in Edible Todmorden are trying. How difficult it actually is, and how amazing it is when it works, and that it works. Because it's all about collaborating across communities of practice of very different people in many places. So I guess food and eating in itself is already a hugely complicated topic, right? And I'm presenting here, you can see the NX Food. So this is a food consultancy company that has presented, here has a slide on where food is going. So there's a lifestyle issues, there's technology issues, there's personalized food. So that's a number of trends that we are facing. If you look at food in those sort of global industrial terms, there's another figure from them here, from the Good Food Institute. Venture capital investment in alternative proteins in million US dollars. So the investment into alternative food sources, alternative protein sources like algae and different forms of jellyfish, etc., and breeding meat on cell cultures is around 1.5 billion US dollars, or has been in 2020, and it's rising very, very steeply. Now that's got very little to do with what Mary was talking about, but it's of course the context in which a lot of people are thinking about food and nutrition, and less so about eating. And it's not, well, it's part of the context, but I think it's worth being aware of, because that's a lot of what people want to happen. That's where a lot of the money is going, which is one of the hindrances for sort of the other end, if you like, which is more about this, or of course, the Edible City Solutions project in itself. So what I'm saying here is that food is often reduced to issues of food security and food sovereignty in a global context, and not necessarily so much about eating and the different dimensions that Mary has just been talking about. So food is more than providing nutrition, of course. I don't need to tell anyone here. It's also about eating as a cultural technique, if you like. It happens, and Ina has said this, it happens in urban assemblages, which in themselves are, of course, already hugely complicated. So which sites can you use? Which can't, you know, there's lots of competition around different spaces. There's a right to the city discourse. There's other ideas of other imaginaries of what people want cities to be. And the whole thing, is happening, and Ina already alluded to that as well, is happening at a time which we tend to call at the moment the Anthropocene, where of course there's major pressure due to climate and other rapid global environmental change. There's major pressure on changing food systems, changing urban systems, etc. So there's a lot of contexts that bring different dynamics and pressures to what seems like very simple, small projects that you're all trying to launch in different urban contexts. And that's what makes it complicated. And of course, these different levels, if you like, these different dynamics all hang together. So what do I mean by sociotrophic territories? Well, there's a lot of work in hydrology on hydrosocial territories. And I've adapted this definition from that. So sociotropic territories, so basically bringing people and eating together, is the socially, naturally, and politically constituted spaces that are recreated through the interactions amongst human practices, foodscapes, technologies, biophysical elements, socioeconomic structures, and cultural political institutions. That's a very, very complicated way of saying or explaining what Mary is doing, right? But so never mind that too much. But what it shows is, and what a lot of people are struggling with when it doesn't go as smoothly as Mary has presented this, what it shows is that within any urban space, even in the context of food, you get these different layers of different people and different sort of powerful institutions trying to optimize or build territories that they consider the right one, right? So you could try to produce food most sustainably. You could try to produce food as cheaply as possible. You can produce the healthiest food that there is, or you could be most efficient about the using of space. And within any urban setting, and I guess there's many of them in the living labs, you are only one actor amongst many that are sort of pushing and fighting and competing for these different kinds of territories. And that's what makes it so hugely complicated. And we see this in a lot of other projects, and it's not only a food and eating phenomenon, that this sort of these competitions around these competing or these alternative territories can be fierce and can be very complicated. And it helps if you're spirited like Mary and you just go ahead and then others will follow. But of course, that doesn't always work. So this is all about complex interactions, and never mind, this is probably going too far now. This is cross-scalar and nonlinear dynamics and uncertainties. That's probably taking it too far. But one point I want to make is about reflexive governance. And I think we're seeing this in a lot of urban contexts across Europe and beyond. So far, what we've often tried to do is within the existing administrative structures of cities, we've tried to sort of optimize instruments or deliver solutions within existing structures. What's happening now is that we have a 20th century administration and governance system, but we have 21st century problems, right? We want to do things fundamentally different. And that means that a lot of the administrative procedures that we are used to, a lot of the instruments that we have need to change. So rather than trying to optimize instruments, we are trying to move to a different kind of responsiveness of administration and sort of actor conglomerates in urban settings. And that means we have to examine fundamentally our own assumptions, which is often quite difficult because, you know, they're of course legally enshrined, and there's people there who, you know, they're there for good reasons. And we have to enter into a process of what many call horizontal learning and feedbacks. So try to understand whether how you do it is actually apt for the kinds of problems that you're facing. And that can be amazingly complicated. And we have a number of examples from Berlin where we are working with administration, trying to move forward into a more kind of flexible space of trying to adapt protocols and processes and procedures so they can cope with these fundamental changes, and they can sort of embrace the energy that people like Mary sort of kick off in the city rather than trying to channel it into the usual channels. So EdiSignet is really at the heart of these debates, trying to do this, which you could, I guess, frame as integrated food systems. And it therefore faces all the challenges that come with these multiple, bringing together these multiple communities of practice. And one thing, just maybe to take a little bit the pressure of the living labs and the follower cities of having to integrate all of this, what we've learned at IRITHESys, and that's really already my final point, what we've learned at IRITHESys is that there are different ways of working together between different people. So sometimes it's good to just follow a leader and chip in, and then you're happy for someone to go ahead and you just go along. Sometimes you find common ground and you can actually do things together. And sometimes it's also very important, and another fancy term here, agonistic, antagonistic working together. But it means basically you stick to your differences and you learn from the differences. You know, not everything needs to fit together. And it's fine to have the differences as long as you don't leave them as antagonistic differences, but you turn them into something that actually goes forward. So what does that mean specifically? Well, the lessons we've learned at IRITHESys in a number of projects, the first one is stay in the room. However, we see this with a lot of, you know what academics are like, right? So if you have an economist and a political ecologist and you stick them in a room, the first thing they want to do is leave, right? Because everything they believe in is not recognized by the opposite, by the other. So we have a very strong stay in the room policy and make sure that you keep talking, even though you think there's no common ground. Name the differences and work through them is very, very important. Don't try to sort of cover them up and pretend that everything's fine. Name them and work with it. Try to understand what you do does. That's a bit of a originally French fancy philosophy policy, but so whatever you do produces different contexts. Yeah, so what you do doesn't only do what you think it does, but it does all sorts of other things for different people. That might be good things, but that might also be problematic things. So think about the context that you're looking at, and don't necessarily think about other things in terms of unintended consequences or failures or collaterals or whatever they've been called. But whatever you do in transformation processes will do all sorts of things, and that's part of the game, right? So, now my slides are stuck. And of course, most importantly, be skeptical about the things that people tell you, especially white men with bullet points, but also be generous in that, other people also might have some ideas. So that's just some very simple lessons learned from across a number of projects, trying to appreciate how amazingly difficult it is to get a few seemingly simple garden projects going in an urban space. So I wish you good luck with the project going ahead, and I hope that many of us will sort of conjure the spirit that Mary portrayed in the first talk. So thank you and good luck with that.
And thank you, Jörg, for this also very inspiring presentation. I would like, please, all the participants pose your questions in the question and answer section. I hope everybody could find them. I have a first question to both of you, and maybe Mary, you could start in answering, or if you feel comfortable with the question, and then you could add. What are the top 3 urban food priorities we should be focusing on in the coming years? Can you have, do you have such a priority list?
We don't have a priority list, but I would say to carry on educating people that the supermarket is not the source of all food, to educate people about the soil and that we're nothing without bees and the soil, and we're nothing without each other. So to stay small, and it's culture change, and culture change is the hardest work a person can do, and it's slow work. Money will not do it, science will not do it, academics cannot do it. It's slow, patient, kind work, culture change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And Jörg, what is your perspective? Which priorities do you would like to focus on, or which are the ones that we should focus on?
I find this difficult. I think in the end, when it comes down to it, it comes down to the people, right? We need. I'm absolutely with Mary there. You need to make this. We can have all sorts of ideas about processes, like I presented, and that's important. But it becomes background if you don't have the people that manage to work together in particular contexts. That for me is a priority, and to have people from an academic perspective, or from a university perspective, I should say, to get the universities involved, we need to change the universities to get people into a position where they can actually contribute to these projects, rather than, there's the usual problems of publication driven, etc., etc. But having sort of transfer indicators, if that's a word, to enable people to do both, to get involved and stay at universities would be important.
Yes. Thank you. There's a question maybe related to what you said, Jörg, from Milena Klimek from Boku. What are some of the examples in Berlin that are using reflexive governance? Do you have some examples? And maybe later on we can share some websites on this.
Yeah, maybe there's a couple of examples. One is closely related to the Edible City Network. It's Peter Feind, our environmental policy person, who's working on a sort of integrative project around food systems that is also trying to, from an integrated systems perspective, trying to change food systems in Berlin. And so I can share a link there. That's together with a bunch of health people, etc. Then there's Climate and Water Under Change, the Einstein Research Unit. I can post links to this, where a lot of people are working together trying to understand sort of land-water interaction under climate change and how that impacts ecosystems. And that has a component of bringing the actors together in that reflexive sense. And actually in parallel to this conference, and I need to head back at some point, there's the Agricultural Systems of the Future. I can also post this, the Food for Future project, which also has a similar approach, trying to build mobile urban agricultural systems. And that also links very closely to trying to bring administrators and regulators on board in trying to approve of new organisms, etc., in new settings, and that requires some new ways. So I can post links as an answer to that, or in the, I guess, in the chat.
Yes, and we also can post these links later in our discussion paper, maybe. There's a question to Mary, which is linked to what Jörg discussed before. How much do you aim to directly impact policy and politics around food and open gardens? Or do you work through and with other partners to influence local political conditions? This is a question from Julia Behringer. Mary, do you want to answer this question?
We're doing a devious style here. We carry on, and then the authorities come to us and say, how can we do that in the next town up the road? So we just sit tight and we wait. And we know what's good in our hearts is contagious. It's contagious, so it's okay.
There's a question linked to this, Mary, from Louisa Otto. Does it started a bit more in looking in the past? Does it started like a guerrilla gardening, and the city had maybe no problem with it, and then they came to you and wanted?
They did have a problem. They didn't like it, and they thought, they're just a bunch of crazies. It will be gone in 6 months. And, you know, 12, 13 years later, they have to say, wow, we've got more tourism. You know, this was not a tourist town and people are coming to look at vegetables. That's crazy. So, yeah, it's all good.
Okay, and there's another practical question, which might be as well from Jenny to Mary. How do you organize your gardening sessions and how do you announce your meetings?
Okay, I'm sorry to say this, but the only medium we have, because it's free, is Facebook and email. So we have a list of 300 people and we never, ever, ever change the day. The first and the third Sunday of every month, we meet at a building. We get our tools, we work for 2 hours, and then we eat together. So we have a committee of leaders that somebody's in charge of cooking, someone's in charge of welcoming, someone decides where the work will be. So over the years, we've learned the best way to organize ourselves.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. There's also the possibility to vote to questions. So I go on with those that have more likes, because there are so many questions in the chat, but I promise that we will really answer also the ones that we maybe not cover. There's a question from for Jörg from Jose Luis Vicente, yeah, from Leibniz Institute, SALF. Since the food system in city is related to surrounding territories, how do you relate to sociotrophic territories with agroecology, urban-rural interactions, sustainable city region food systems, or food sheets? The example for Berlin and the surroundings, Brandenburg. And maybe, Mary, you could think how this is in Todmorden. This would be also interesting. Maybe Jörg first.
Yeah, thank you. So that's you're absolutely right. I mean, I focus now on this urban issue because it's called the Edible Cities Network, right? But of course, we're talking always about metropolitan regions, and I guess the Berlin is a good case because it's so heavily interactive or interdependent with its surrounding Brandenburg regions in so many ways. So I would think sociotrophic territories need to always be thought of across boundaries. And of course, different legislative competencies and responsibilities are one of the challenges, right, of bringing this together. I would also say we have in German the distinction between Hinterland and Umland, where I would think we would need to think of cities as having a direct surroundings and then a global hinterland where we footprint through major supply chains. So I think you're dead right. These territories need to be not thought of as small networks, but they extend through all kinds of flows into their surroundings of various distance. Thank you.
Okay, Mary, how it looks the interactions between the urban and the rural in Todmorden?
That's a difficult question. So as nobody's paid and there is no office, we do our best. So every day we get requests from students across the world at the last minute to help them with their work and to go and talk with people or Zoom with people. So we try as much as we can, but we are not structured for that. We're structured from the bottom up to be with people, to be dirty, to be digging. But wherever we can, we just say, there's nothing in it for us, but if you come or if we share with you, you can either take some ideas or not. So that's how it rolls for us, because we would never have the time, because everybody's hungry for a solution. And we only have our solution for a tiny town. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mary. A question to Jörg, but maybe I think also Mary could say something about it. What is the role of networks, such like EdiSitNet or other networks, in bringing together people, as you mentioned, in a participatory manner? A question from Ruth.
Yeah, thank you. Good. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go first, Mary?
No, go.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. So I think there's probably probably many roles to it, but two functions that I value about these projects. First of all, they create spaces where people can meet, right? So there's a bit of there's a few resources to create meetings, to bring people together, to make people travel, to buy people out of their everyday mess and give them the opportunity to engage and give them kind of the freedom of mind to do that, for at least for some time. The other is, I think, that these projects as a whole contribute importantly to changing the discourse in the settings that they operate in, right? So if the one thing is to sort of to plow right into it like Mary does and then hope that people will follow if they see what happens. The other one is to come from the other side and try to change what is acceptable and what counts as proper urban development, etc., in a setting. Yeah. So if you manage, I think these projects have an important role in establishing these notions, such as edible cities and nature-based solutions, and what that actually means in the mindsets of those who are responsible for administering urban and rural spaces. So I think that's probably the two things. And of course, they draw also, if they work well, they draw all sorts of people in beyond the usual suspects.
Thank you, Jörg. I'm seeing also in the
Oh,
chat.
can I say something, please?
Yes, please.
In response, I let you go first, Jörg, because I was thinking whether to tell the truth or not, but I'm going to tell the truth because I prefer the truth. So my experience is here, in this instance, in the UK, some people went off and got a huge amount of money and created a network. They monetarized it. They created a network, but when the money went, although the website's there, it was completely dead. So that crushes a tiny piece of people's hearts. And the network wanted them to have the same font, the same logo. They wanted to establish all these rules. Plants and people don't like rules too much. So sorry, Jörg, that's what I wanted to say. It wasn't good for us.
I'm fully with you. There's project mania in academia, and there's branding and all sorts. And it's important not to treat communities as if you can extract things from them for your project. That's, I guess, the big risk of project funding. So I'm all with you there. Happens all too often.
Yes, and this is also something that we are struggling with, and I'm really I'm open to discuss really solutions on this. If there are solutions, please put it in the chat in the question and answer section. I will follow the question and answer section. Please, those that put the questions in the chat, put it in the others and like the questions, so we have a priority on the questions. I have a question from Shashwati Shot. Sorry if I don't pronouncing well. The question goes to Jörg and Mary. How do we start incorporating public urban green space with urban agriculture practice? The first being fundamentally public and the second being fundamentally private or semi-private. And how and what should we first engage? Who wants to start?
I'll start. I think so I'll tell you what's happened over the 12 years here. It's so beautiful. There's a little bakery, there's farmers this isn't farming country. And since we started, people started a conversation about food, about growing, about soil. And so now we've got little farms developing on the hill. We've got a climate challenge college. All things have grown from that initial project. It sparked a fire of people wanting to make their own private, knowing that people would buy from them and people were interested in where their food came from. So I think those community actions gave confidence to private investors to go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Jörg?
Yeah, well, I would support that. I would also think that ideally these projects work to blur boundaries between private and public, in that the private probably becomes a bit more accessible and not private in that sort of fenced off and elitist sense. But I would think both spaces require different strategies because they're regulated in very different ways and they need to be approached in different ways. But I don't see why tackling both at the same time, if you have the resources, is not the most meaningful way. I don't think it has to be an either or, depending on, of course, the specific situation. I don't think one lever is better than the other.
Okay, we continue with the next question, which is most rated from JPC van Schaik. Sounds like Netherlands. Would you say this concept is more about educating and involving people than about creating an alternative to our current food system? And are there concepts for large-scale food production that would incorporate the lessons learned to produce food in the general population? Is this in fact the goal? Who wants to deal with this?
In my world, if I can go first, I'm there absolutely with Mary. I think this shouldn't be a difference, right? If you educate and involve people, then that's creating the alternative. I'm working in a number of projects, large-scale projects that are trying to change the food system and the agricultural system now in Germany, for example. And there's a lot of that sort of systems analysis. And that's fine, of course, that's what people do, and we're involved in that. I would think that these sort of notions such as sociotropic territories are try to bridge, at least that's how I see my role, between what's happening on the ground and what matters to the people, and kind of the systemic development, if you like. But they tend to follow very, very different logics. So I think going ahead and involving people to sort of create facts on the ground, and not think, I think Mary made the good point, don't think about scaling up too much, right? But just keep going at that horizontal level, and that will change things. So I wouldn't see the difference too much.
Mary, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just keep. We have no ambition at all. I have a personal ambition, which is to grow the group that makes decisions with more diverse. We've got a Thai woman, we've got a German guy who's head of attention to detail. That's his role, attention to detail, very stereotyping, to grow the confidence of other people to lead and spread the word. So no, we don't have any big ideas. I'll leave that to my new partner, him, Jürgen. He can do that bit. I'll do the other bit.
Okay.
We need both of us types of people.
Yeah, yes. And maybe also more people with more strategy. There's a question from Paul de Graaf, the next most voted question, which is, I think, to Jörg, how do you deal with different worldviews? Do you have examples and how you work with this kind of agonist-antagonist challenges?
Yeah, it's a good question and it's super complicated. So an example from Brandenburg, where we struggle to engage within a biosphere reserve with some fishing activity. The mix of people reaches from sort of radical conservationists who basically trying to protect nature with and keep people out of it, to sort of the urban elites, leisure, sort of country residences, to outright right-wing extremists, national socialists, and all kinds of sect-like structures, plus some local population who's been around for a while, and it's hugely complicated. I think what I would say is that what's making this particularly difficult is that we tend to come through established funding logics of these projects. So we deal with flora and we deal with fauna. What no one really wants to get into is the actual negotiation between these different interests. You know, that's not really, that sort of social ecological thinking is still rare in the initiatives we are starting. So bar the National Socialists, which I probably wouldn't engage with too closely, I think we need to work, there's no other way but work through this, and ideally in an agonistic way, so in that Chantal Mouffe sense of make differences, keep differences and make them productive and move on. Don't try to convert people into edible city followers, you know.
Thank you. Mary, do you want to add something on this? We have more questions, so I would...
No, thank you.
I would move to the next question, which is from Amin Emadi, for both of you, Mary and Jörg, and relevant to their relevant scales, of course. How often do you consider intergenerational interaction in your projects and work? Speaking of older generation that are more practically involved in food systems, farmer, chefs, hospitality, etc., and younger generations that are thriving through the current education system we have and suffer there, of course.
Oh, I'll start. We think about it all the time. And if you come and join us on a gardening Sunday, you'll see. So each person on the committee has a role. There's somebody whose role is kindness and inclusion. Another guy's role is recovery, because we like to reach out to people with addictions. And that addiction could be love, it could be depression, it could be drugs. So we've got adapted tools for older people. And children are so important because many older people are separated from the companionship of children. And when older people love to pat the chair at dinner time to say, oh, come and sit next to me. So we think they're the things that give us joy to see those interactions. So we think about it a lot.
Jörg, is there also from the academia take on this?
Yeah, I have an example, unfortunately not from IRITHESys or Germany, in fact, but from the UK. When I was still in Norwich, very different from Todmorden, but in many ways, at UEA, we had an environmental science program, a master's program, that was very open to people from business and government agencies, in sort of a lifelong learning mentality. And that worked fantastically well, in that you had these sort of spirited younger master students who wanted to change the world, better yesterday than today. And you had these sort of more seasoned practitioners that were very sort of versed in the realities of large business or government agencies, etc. And that worked really, really well in bringing the two together and trying to work out how you could get that enthusiasm into the structures, so to speak. In Germany, unfortunately, we are a long way behind. In, what we know theoretically that you know, university is also for people beyond 25. But we're not getting it on the ground really at the moment.
Yeah, there's another question to Mary from Julia Kasprowski. How was the British culture be included in the development of your project? It's switching a bit here. Would you say that the culture played a role in designing the project in the way it evolved? So maybe.
Yes. The British culture is to say, get off my land, don't touch my things. The British culture says it is the job of the council to pick up rubbish, prune trees. So we knew that the British culture needed a little tweak there. So we love to pick up rubbish. we pick up tons and tons of rubbish to model that we are all responsible citizens. So I used to work for a local authority. So the truth is that local authorities will have very little power because of the economic crisis in this country. So we want to show that there is joy in being an active citizen. And really that doesn't fit too well with the English culture of it's somebody else's job to do those things. And more people have taken that attitude. We'll fix our own problems, which is great for resilience.
There are more questions, Mary, in the chat on incredible Edible Todmorden. Maybe we also can include them later on and add some answers. I would like to pick up a question which is also linked to the next session where we are in some next minutes. It's from Wendy Fjellstad from Norway. She asked about monitoring impacts. And I think she don't ask only on the technical way to do monitoring, but what would be the indicators for your impact, or what do you think about citizen science and recording whatever number of sites, amount of veggies grown, etc., to use this as an argument? Is this something which makes sense to you, or is this too theoretically driven? And
oh, I love that question. Thank you for that beautiful question. If you go on our website, you will see that very clever university guys have done all that stuff for us. We're not in the slightest bit interested in acres and percentage and weights. So a university has done all that work. Somebody else paid them. We wouldn't bother paying them. And we're very grateful. So you can download it. It's all there. We're interested in measuring the fact that our currency is kindness. We have all the money we need to exist. That we have the gardens suffer no vandalism. We get more and more volunteers every year. The number increases. We win all the awards for various things. So we haven't got anybody measuring anything. Joy is our measurement. If we feel joy and everyone turns up for the meeting and has lovely coffee and cake, there's the outcome, joy. That's what we're going for.
Thank you, Mary. This was a perfect start into the next session, let's say. Thank you all for this opening session. Thank you, Mary, so much. And thank you, Jörg, for these interesting insights and discussions. I'm sure we will find and think about new formats to continue this discussion and amplify this. And thank you all of you here in the chat and in the question and answer box for all your questions and also some statements and replies. We will really organize all this stuff, the information, and provide this to all of you and continue the discussion. Thank you for Mary. Thank you, Jörg.